Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 301, First Steps to Defend the Clan. Third Person POV. Yuzushiyogakure, Year 42. Just as expected, the village did not react very well to the truth about the attack they would receive. Even with everyone frightened, the leader continued speaking on top of the gate. That is why we must stand united, working together so that we can survive. We have no choice but to defend our clan by ourselves. How did we come to this point? How did Konoha abandon us? The crowd shouted in fury. The shinobi expressed their anger by clenching their teeth, while the housewives cried uncontrollably, clutching their small children. Some children looked at their parents without really understanding what was happening. Unfortunately, we are alone in this and have no choice but to fight for ourselves. Konoha will not come, said Masaki, closing his eyes in sorrow, while the crowd continued roaring curses and insults against Konoha. They did not yet know the real situation of the threat and until then, still nurtured the hope that Konoha would send help to them. But still, we are not without help. Some members abandoned Konoha to come help us and are willing to fight alongside us. I will introduce them later. For now, I want to organize some things. That is why I want you to divide yourselves into 3 groups. Masaki continued. The leader began to speak to the crowd. The ninjas would be the first group. Those who had some proficiency with chakra, but despite that could not fight, would divide into another group. The third group was composed of those who could do nothing with chakra, left only with entirely manual work. These were the youngest and the oldest. Still, this group was important, because even if they could not fight, it did not change the fact that their children and grandchildren could become ninjas later on. After all, even if they had no immediate talent, the genes of the Uzumakis carried on to the next generations. 2 Uzumaki farmers could give birth to a powerful ninja if he had enough talent to manipulate chakra, just as 2 powerful ninjas could have a child without talent for chakra. The dense energy and the powerful amount of chakra remained within each one of the Uzumakis. That is why the clan was so special. We will talk later. I will ask to meet each group separately. Remember, we will have to unite more than at any other moment in order to act and survive what is to come. Do you understand? He spoke while everyone began to disperse, although some still remained, insulting Konoha. Masaki returned to Minato's group. Well, I will have to organize the village. How about we start expanding the island's defenses right away? I will ask Elder Mu to show the protective layer around the island. Masaki spoke directly to Kushina. Kushina then looked at Minato, while he nodded. All right. Kushina can start doing that. Meanwhile, Suna and Hanabi can begin organizing with you those who will train in wind and water styles, while I go somewhere else. Minato said, already beginning to set his plans in motion. All right, then we will begin. At that moment, a young woman approached them. This here is my granddaughter, Asuna. I asked her to help me with some things, and I would like you to accompany her. Masaki said, as the girl approached to greet them. Hello, I am Asuna Uzumaki. I know you are here to help the clan. I am deeply grateful for everything you are doing. The Uzumakis will never forget, she said. She must have been about 15 years old, a little younger than the other girls. Of course, how could we let you be destroyed? Suna said with a friendly smile, while Asuna only responded with a timid one. Yes, Grandpa told me everything about you. Well, I'm going to borrow my Makoto. Minato said suddenly, interrupting the conversation, since he had nothing else to do there and it would be good to have this granddaughter of Masaki helping the other girls connect with the people of the clan. He disappeared, while touching Makoto's shoulder. Ah, he's already gone. Asuna murmured, a little surprised to see Minato vanishing without being able to talk to him. Did you want something with him? Suna did not fail to narrow her eyes at this girl. That made Hanabi look too, while Masaki, Mu, and Kushina walked away, leaving only the three of them. Seeing their gaze, she became a little embarrassed. I wanted to greet him as well, after all, he has been helping the clan all this time. I heard about his feats in the war, I was just curious. She said. He is on another task now, anyway. Can you show us the Uzumaki clan? Suna said, though still a little suspicious of this other Uzumaki's intentions. Minato was someone world famous for his feats, and there was no doubt that several girls would be interested in him. After all, he was also very handsome. In Konoha, there was already a large group of these girls, mostly their age, saying they liked Minato since he entered the academy, because he was popular. Suna always made a point of not letting them get close to Minato, and had to use her fists in anger many times. After all, she already had to deal with three other girls who had made it clear they would be in his life. She didn't want a crowd of them sharing him. That was unacceptable, both for Suna and for any of the other three. Kushina perhaps was even worse now that she was free to see these crazy fangirls asking for autographs or even asking him out without any shame. That's why this Asuna made her suspicious. Suna did not doubt that her grandfather might also be pushing his granddaughter toward Minato, or even talking about his heroic feats to impress the girl, since the Uzumaki clan had rules about relationships with outsiders and bringing in a not-so-pure bloodline. That's why it irritated Suna. In any case, she should keep an eye on this one. Meanwhile, Kushina was analyzing the barrier with Mu and other Uzumakis. You see, it is a barrier that was created centuries ago, and it has kept us safe ever since. Mu began to explain. I'm sorry, Mr. Mu, but centuries ago there were no battles with Bijou. Can you imagine what a Bijou Dama can do? Kushina said, leaving the man visibly disturbed, finally seeming to understand why this plan to improve the barrier. Of course, I was in the war and it was not a very pretty sight. He said. Mass explosions that could remove mountains from the map in seconds. Exactly, Minato explained this problem to me before we came here. Kushina said, after all he had no idea since he had not witnessed it or managed to unleash his Bijou yet. She didn't have such great control with chakra, still learning to use the Rasengan, which was one of the reasons Minato had given her this technique. It was for her to learn to make the Bijou Dama in the future. Even so, Minato had made clear the effects that a Bijou Dama could have on the battlefield. We are not reinforcing the barrier to deal with the ninjas, but if they send the Bijou, something Minato is sure they will do, we will be at the mercy of the explosion, and if we cannot block it, we must have barriers that can delay the damage it can cause. Kushina explained. I understand. Then let's begin. Kushina said while creating clones, creating more than 1,000 of them, stunning all the other Uzumakis. Let's study the barrier and create one just like it. Databane. Kushina shouted to her 1,000 copies. Mu and his companions, who were a squad for maintaining the barrier over the years, stood there watching the girl working quickly, studying the barrier. Meanwhile, Minato returned to where they would stay after Masaki had given him. He was still bringing Makoto, blindfolded, to one of the princess-like rooms, as he entered the room and placed her on the bed. So that's it, you're going to leave me locked up here? Makoto complained. Tomorrow. We'll start training, you won't be able to use all your powers so as not to wear your eyes out too much, but at least, we will start releasing your powers little by little, how about that? Minato said to her, with a tone of concern, while Makoto, despite pressing her lips together, understood what he meant. It was too soon. But Minato had just said that she would begin training her eyes again, which would finally make her start removing those bandages. The real problem was that the eyes would begin to interact with Makoto's body, which would take time on a molecular level. However, she could already do many things now, as long as she didn't push herself to the point of trying to summon a complete Susanoo before she was ready. And knowing Makoto, Minato knew she was stubborn enough to try something, at least he would be keeping an eye on her. And remember, you will rest for the rest of the day, I will make sure that happens, and tomorrow we will go to Mount Mayaboku with Kushina. It is time for her to learn to use the next phase of Kurama. and for you to test your incomplete Susanoo without straining your eyes. But you must never go beyond the limit I set for you," Minato said with a serious tone, while Makoto was already on a futon that Minato had just placed for her. "If you go beyond your limit, you may go blind forever, and this is not just about fighting now. You will never be able to fight properly again, Makoto. That's why I still ask you to rest a bit. In a few weeks you will be able to use your eye as you wish," Minato said as a warning. "No, I want to fight," Makoto said, even with the risks. Minato just sighed, already expecting this from her in the end. "So be it. Rest all day today, and tomorrow we will train," Minato said. "Now I'm leaving," he said at the end as he prepared to leave. "All right, just come back soon," she asked while Minato left a clone so that no one would bother her and then disappeared from the clan. Minato was somewhere else the next moment, while the huge waterfall, or rather, the edge of it was right in front of him above the clouds of natural energy bursting from the place. He easily recognized the place from his first encounter with Gurren transformed into a dragon serpent. But now there was no sign of dragons in the sky, it was just Minato and the strange place. Minato was there for a reason as he simply advanced to the edge and jumped, entering a sea of natural energy, taking care that his body did not absorb too much. He soon left the clouds and was in free fall toward the sea. A few seconds later, his body hit the water, and he sank into the sea, making a water-style air bubble jutsu around his face and diving once again into the clan of fish that could transform into dragons. "Let's see if they can help us," Minato murmured calmly as he approached the bottom of the sea. Chapter 302, Kraken. Third-person POV. Somewhere in the ocean, year 42. Minato took some time to speak with the fish clan as soon as he entered. They were hostile toward him as soon as he was seen, but after some recognized him from the waterfall event, mainly because he himself had surpassed the clouds at the request of one of the lords of the sky, their attitude shifted. The meeting with the chief was surrounded by suspicion. He had first said that Minato should not share any information about what he had seen above the clouds, because it was strictly forbidden for everyone in the clan. That was not a problem for Minato, but it was a little difficult to negotiate when he asked for their help. In the end, he managed to secure the elders' help with a task that Minato guaranteed would not be too risky. He was there for a reason, his goal, to try to expand his field of vision and surveillance. And what could be better than a group of fish that could swim across the entire ocean, while tracking his enemies and passing on reports, all from the bottom of the sea? No shinobi could do that, so no Kage would ever imagine their armies being watched from below. No one really knew those fish. Not even Minato knew the clan beyond what he had spoken about with Gurren. Still, they confirmed that they had no contact with any other human from the surface. They had been so surprised when Gurren, for the first time, had said that he had met a human, thinking him naive at first, and even the older fish had told him to stay away. Other than that, none had ever met anyone from the surface. Minato had to negotiate a few things with the fish clan. In fact, he needed to take on a task to eliminate the clan's greatest enemy. So after speaking with the elder, he dove deeper into the sea. Even though he was somewhat weakened by having the power of a devil fruit, Minato could still use his jutsus. With his space jutsu, he could easily escape any dangerous situation. At the same time that he felt confident, he could also use great power from his fruit, even if not in its full form. His body also remained strong, and he could even swim. Minato had almost none of the disadvantages that a fruit user would have in the world of One Piece. Obviously, he did not complain. In the depths of a trench, a few kilometers from the Horned Fish clan, Minato found himself in the middle of the abyss as he descended for several minutes. And from the darkness, eyes stared at him, glowing with malice as they watched him approach like prey. The creature had chakra, Minato could feel it, and it was very powerful, a quantity as great as that of an elite ninja, but it was only chakra due to its enormous size, and it was not controllable. And this creature, being none other than a kraken, was not the kind of creature with whom people usually made contracts. Then, he disappeared into the middle of the abyss, being covered by darkness, and everything calmed down, as if nothing had happened. However, in the next moment, intense yellow flashes began to appear, illuminating the entire trench, before the place trembled. Soon after, Minato returned to the fish clan bringing along a massive kraken. The creature was completely scorched with burns and blackened patches all over its body, while Minato dragged it by one of its tentacles, terrifying all the fish as they watched the humans simply hauling the creature before them. They could certainly deal with the kraken when it attacked the clan. Even though these fish had failed the waterfall trial, they still had their own strength within the sea. Perhaps they were not as strong as Gurren, but an entire clan could be very dangerous when they all attacked a single enemy. Besides, the kraken was quite persistent, attacking them from time to time, before starting to retreat, and it was not worth chasing it for the fish. Since doing so put them in danger, and that was exactly what the kraken wanted, to face them in smaller groups, where it had more of a chance. This had already lasted 20 years. Minato left the kraken outside the clan and went to a place where he could speak with the elder. He entered a cave, where there was enough air to communicate. "I will take the kraken," Minato said. "Wait, isn't that dangerous?" the elder murmured, though there was little doubt in his tone. Minato was the one who had defeated the kraken so easily, accomplishing something they had not managed in 2 decades, so he would be able to handle it in any case. "Yes, I kept it alive for a reason. Now I will keep it with me. It will no longer be a problem for you, nor will it be able to return here." "So, your problem is solved," Minato began. "Now I want you to fulfill your part of the deal. I need you to find me on the coast of Uzushi-Ogakure." He spoke with some caution, wondering how those fish could find him, since not even he knew in which part of the sea he would be, and it was definitely not close to the elemental nations. Seeing the doubtful look on Minato's face, the elder quickly understood what he meant. "If you are wondering how we will find you, well, I want you to take some horns from clan members who have passed away. With them, we will be guided to find you. We use our horns to find lost members or even our home, since we place all the horns in one place, and everyone can sense the direction of those horns. After all, how do you think we always return here, no matter where in the world we end up?" said the fish. Minato was surprised by the explanation but nodded at it. It seemed quite reasonable. "All right. Bring me those horns and I will take them with me." He only negotiated a few more details and quickly returned to the water, where the kraken still remained unconscious. They would have a better conversation in the land of the Uzumakis. The elder brought the horns he had promised, while Minato said his farewells, and the rest of the clan watched him in silence. There were many young fish, these would not take part in the war, just like the elderly. Not even the fish Minato wanted to watch over the seas would be directly involved. Minato's goal was to have good eyes in the middle of the sea to monitor enemies coming from the north, south, or east of Uzushi-Ogakure. With just a hand seal, Minato touched the kraken and disappeared along with the massive body, also carrying the horns in his hands. The scenery changed and, from the bottom of the sea, he reappeared under the sunlight, filled with the air of the surface as the bubble he had created in his mouth burst. "Minato?" He quickly began to hear screams, immediately analyzing the situation. There were hundreds of Kushina clones shouting at him. Behind them stood other Uzumakis, staring open-mouthed as he fell from the sky with the enormous kraken, which hit the ground with such force that it created a giant wave, lifting water and drenching the countless Kushinas near the coast. The collective scream of the many Kushinas receded with the wave before all of them looked furiously at him, while the creature still remained almost completely out of the water, its body far too large for such shallow waters. It was more than 50 meters long. "Minato! What is this? Where did you get this giant creature?" "Well, I brought this to help, and it's not for eating," he replied, while Kushina was the only one able to complain more clearly. It was annoying to hear several of her talking at once. The other Uzumakis just watched, not knowing what to say. "What do you mean, you brought this thing to help, Databane?" the collective scream echoed once again. Minato let go of the kraken and landed near the shore, in front of the copies of his fiancée. "I want to use it, but I can't tame it. It's a wild creature. However, I believe Makoto can do it with her Sharingan. That's why I want to ask you to seal the kraken until tomorrow, when I will remove Makoto's blindfold to begin her training," Minato said, turning his attention to the other Uzumakis. "You want to use this creature?" Do you really think the disabled Uchiha can control it? Mu seemed very surprised as he murmured. Well, it's a gamble, but there's a chance we can succeed. And all help should be welcome, correct? Minato said in the end. Of course, you're right. The elder finally snapped out of his stun state and nodded. Now I just want you to keep the Kraken restrained. If it wakes up, take care of it, Minato said, closing the matter, while Mu Uzumaki nodded in the end. He returned to Kushina, realizing that the original was not there. He noticed she was on the other side of the island, busy with her own clones, since she didn't seem to like the presence of the other Uzumakis very much and preferred to let her clones handle that work. Do you need anything, Kushina? Minato asked. She only shook her head, but still gave him a silly smile, as always. No, Minato. Leave it to me, she said. He just nodded. Then I'm going. I'll stay with Makoto, I'll be waiting for you at the house, he said, disappearing the next moment. Soon the Uzumakis began to work, drawing several seals and creating a barrier around the Kraken. Since it was not a very intelligent creature, it could not use chakra effectively. If it woke up and tried to break the barrier, it would only have its brute strength, still immense, as each strike of its tentacles seemed to weigh tons. Still, nothing the Uzumaki elders could not handle with Fuinjutsu and adamantine chains. Minato returned later and found Makoto lying down, pleased to see her truly resting. As soon as she noticed him, she immediately turned her face toward him, as if she had already sensed his presence. Minato, she said in a calm tone. Hello, Makoto. I hope I didn't make you wait too long, he said, not wanting to leave her alone. No, the girls came here. Suna and Hanabi brought lunch and ate with me. Kushina went to have lunch with her mother, she informed. Well, that's great, said Minato, noticing a leftover lunchbox still there. Is it all right if I eat this? I was in the water for hours and I didn't feel like eating seaweed, it didn't look very appealing, he said, picking up the lunchbox. Kushina only gave a smile while he sat beside her and began eating. Well, it seems they're all busy. Minato commented with a small smile, while he could feel with Haki, Makoto, and Hanabi discussing with Masaki Uzumaki about how the training would begin, after choosing which Uzumakis would perform the water and wind jutsus. Kushina continued studying the barrier for the rest of the day, and her clones assisted her. Suna seemed worried. Makoto said while Minato stopped looking through Haki at what they were doing. Let me guess, she's jealous of a group of Uzumaki girls? Minato laughed, finishing his lunchbox and snuggling beside his fiancée, embracing her and caressing her belly that was growing day after day. There was his child. Their first child. The thought of becoming a father made him nervous, but he needed to be firm in that moment, for his child, for Makoto, and for everyone else on that island. Yes, she said some Uzumaki girls are asking about you all the time, Kushina replied. Well, it's not like I'm here to build a harem or something. I already have one Uzumaki for myself, I don't need anyone else, Minato said as if it were obvious. He had no desire to get more women. Obviously, that world had the tendency to create fan clubs for very popular and strong people, and he was no exception. Even in Konoha, the girls acted that way, and Suna had always been quite protective. The Uzumakis would react the same way. Remembering how girls with looks of interest and admiration always approached him, even Kushina had acted like that at first, so it was no surprise. But Minato had no intention of throwing more fuel onto that fire. Well, I told her that, Makoto said, laughing. You of all people. I thought you'd be wanting to gut some Uzumaki girls, Makoto, Minato said. Well, I can't say I like the idea, but I know you already have too many problems dealing with a Uchiha, a Senju, an Uzumaki, and a Hyuga. Even I can't understand you, Minato. Well, you're not wrong, Minato sighed. Ah, come on. It seems like you're taking everything as if it were a huge problem, when in reality, we don't even bother you that much. We're pretty easygoing, Makoto wanted to defend herself. Minato didn't want to answer, but she was right. If he had to deal with a bunch of annoying, troublesome women, he would rather choose only one. His harem of 4 women was quite reasonable. After all, they respected him and respected one another. There was a certain balance and harmony in the family of 5 there. Or, at least, they had learned to do so over time. Suna might have had a more radical personality, but she was far from being like a young Sakura from Naruto, whose way of acting Minato didn't like at all. "So, the training will begin tomorrow?" Makoto asked, while Minato felt her presence. "Yes. We'll remove your blindfold tomorrow, and you'll open your eyes for the first time," he informed. She didn't respond, only acknowledged it, and they fell into silence again. Minutes passed, and Makoto turned her face toward Minato, still clinging to her in that house, alone together. "Is it all right for you to stay here?" she asked, realizing Minato hadn't left yet, even though the day was not over. "Let's just say I don't intend to leave. You know. Ever since I learned you were going to be a mother, the mother of my child, we haven't had time to simply be like this, doing nothing but enjoying each other's company. Maybe we can take advantage of this afternoon. I want to be a good father to this boy, and I would love to enjoy my future wife while she's pregnant," he said, smiling. They wouldn't do anything beyond sharing each other's company. Makoto still had the blindfold over her eyes, but she had the chance to feel that moment, opening a small smile and resting her head on Minato's chest for the rest of the day. Chapter 303, Returning to Mount Myoboku. Third-person POV. Yuzushi Obicure, Year 42. Then you stayed here all day. Hanabi, who had taken a bath and was drying her hair, approached the kitchen, hearing Tsuna talking to Minato and Makoto, who were also there. "Yes." Minato replied calmly while preparing dinner for everyone, cooking in a pot. Hanabi saw Tsuna pouting at hearing that and said nothing else. Until she finally turned to Hanabi. "Well, if you just got out of the bath, I'll go take mine now," she said as she left the kitchen. "Kushina hasn't come yet?" Hanabi asked while Minato continued preparing the food. Makoto was sitting at the table still with the blindfold. "No. It seems she's at her mother's house," Minato said, sensing with his haki the positions of all the people on the island. "But she'll be here soon to have dinner with us." "Ah, how are you?" Hanabi went to the table to join Makoto and didn't fail to ask the Uchiha, knowing her training would begin tomorrow. "I'm fine, a little uncomfortable, but fine," she said with her blindfold still on her face. "I was thinking of taking off your blindfold tomorrow, but maybe it's better tonight. At least to start adapting better at night rather than with the glare of the day," Minato said, while Makoto nodded. Tsuna came back shortly after, drying her hair, while someone opened the front door, indicating that Kushina had arrived. "Smells good," Kushina shouted from the entrance as she approached the kitchen with a smile. "Hello, Kushina, how are you?" Minato said, as she came closer and gave him a kiss on the cheek before returning to the other girls. "I'm fine. I was with my mother," she said before sniffing the air. "How good it is to eat Minato's food again. It's been a while." Kushina was excited. Minato added the last seasonings to what he was making before finally starting to set it on the table, with everyone serving themselves. "It's ready," he said, while Kushina was the first to dig in. Minato ended up serving Makoto right after and then sat at the table. "So, when are we going to get married?" Tsuna couldn't help but ask, looking at Makoto and noticing that she was being a little spoiled by Minato, since when she arrived she had found the two lying down and hugging. She couldn't help but ask. It seemed she was a little jealous of their interaction, since Makoto was the mother of their first child. That question made all the girls at the table stop eating immediately and look at Minato. He was caught by surprise, stared at Tsuna with slightly widened eyes before thinking for a moment. "Well, I plan to do that before the attack, but I doubt we'll have time for it. How about after all this mess, when we no longer have enemies to worry about, we can do it?" he said. "What do you think?" he asked them. "Well, I don't think it's bad," Kushina murmured. Hanabi remained silent. Makoto said nothing, only nodded. After that, no one said anything else and they ate in silence. Minato had to break the silence. "Speaking of which, How do weddings work here in Yuzushiogakure? I didn't ask. Do you know anything? Minato asked Kushina, since he hadn't talked to Masaki yet about this subject, and had decided to marry the 4 girls. Well, about that. I think my mother had said something. Kushina seemed thoughtful. But I don't think it's any different from a traditional wedding in Konoha. I understand. I don't think we'll have a very large audience, and I know you wanted your relatives to be there too, but the circumstances don't allow it. I hope that won't be a problem. Minato said. It's all right, Minato. We understand. Suna said, looking at him with a solemn gaze. Well, I can't complain much. My mother will be there, but it doesn't matter. We are here of our own will, we chose this and we will go through with it too. Kushina said. Minato felt satisfied with her answer and went back to eating. My grandfather is also here, he's the only relative I have, I can't complain about that. Hanabi said. Her grandfather ended up staying with Kushina's mother, helping her as much as he could, since he refused to come here and instead let them focus on the war that was to come. After eating, Kushina herself had set the table while Tsuna washed the dishes. Hanabi had prepared the bed, since they would all sleep in the same room. Minato was in another room along with Makoto, as he began to remove the bandages and dressings from her eyes. Tsuna came shortly after to check the condition of her eyes, and he started to unwrap the last bandages. When he removed the final one, Makoto showed her eyes closed, still a little swollen, but nothing worrisome. It was more because she had kept the bandage for so long. How are you? Do you feel anything? Tsuna asked, crouching beside Makoto's chair. No, on the contrary. It's a relief not to have so much on my face anymore. Makoto said with a small smile. Now I need you to open your eyes very slowly, and if you feel a lot of pain, close them immediately. Minato instructed. Makoto did as Minato had said. Her eyelids trembled, starting to open slightly. There wasn't much light in that room besides a candle, precisely so she could return to seeing without too much brightness. She began to open her eyes, revealing the dark shade of a common Uchiha. She trembled, feeling a little uncomfortable seeing Minato and Tsuna in front of her, but her vision was quite blurry. She began blinking several times, trying to improve the clarity. Her eyes finally opened fully, and she narrowed them immediately. It's a little uncomfortable, she admitted. Tsuna leaned closer to her face to check if her pupils would dilate too much, but they seemed quite normal. Well, this will bother you a little over the next few hours as you keep your eyes open, but by tomorrow you'll already be able to see, Tsuna said as she stepped back. Makoto looked at them, her vision still a bit blurry, and nodded. How good it is to see again, she commented, smiling anyway. Welcome back, Makoto. Tomorrow we'll see what your eyes can do, Minato said, standing up before offering his hand to Makoto. She touched his hand, stood up, and together they went to the room, where they found Hanabi and Kushina talking in their futons. Minato and the others joined them. Well, let's rest. Tomorrow we have a long day, Minato said. He knew he wouldn't have the same luxury he had today anymore. I heard about the kraken you brought, where did you get that, Minato? Hanabi suddenly asked. Kraken? What kraken? Tsuna asked. You had to see it. Minato simply appeared on the island's coast with a huge giant octopus. My clones were all scared. Kushina laughed. Well, I'll need Makoto to put a genjutsu on it, but we'll do that the day after tomorrow, Minato said. They talked a little more, while each one got into their futon, finally going to sleep. This is the first time we're sleeping together, Kushina couldn't help but comment, when everyone was already in silence, ready to sleep. I'd prefer we don't use futons next time. I'd like a more traditional bed, Minato said. He missed sleeping in a Western bed. Lately he had been sleeping on futons, since most of the time he spent on missions and barely had time in the apartment, and had stayed in the Senju clan in the last few days in Konoha, where they only had futons. I'd like one too, Hanabi didn't fail to comment as well. Well, let's leave that discussion for tomorrow. How about we get some rest? Tomorrow we'll have to start training with the Uzumakis. Suna said. No one disagreed and silence soon fell. The next day, Minato had woken up earlier and prepared breakfast, while all the girls joined him shortly after. Makoto was perfectly fine, as far as Minato could tell. She still blinked her eyes in discomfort, but this time she could even serve herself. Suna took her to the room and did some more exams on her before giving her approval as Makoto's doctor. Great. Kushina, do you want to leave the clones to start working on the barrier and we'll head to Mount Mayaboku? Minato said in a more serious tone, while Kushina listened. Hanabi and Suna went to the requested Uzumaki areas to begin training, while Makoto, Kushina, and Minato went to speak with Masaki. Kushina left 100 clones along with Mu to work on the barrier, while Minato discussed the clan's defenses with Masaki. We will begin self-production of explosive tags together with the members who can make them. There are more than 4,600 Uzumakis who can perform Fuinjutsu with chakra. Masaki said to Minato. Very well. I want to give you this. Minato said, handing over a scroll with millions of explosive tags he had. We will make good use of this. The Uzumakis cannot repay it now, but we will in the future. Masaki said, while Minato nodded. All right. I will be gone the entire day, I'll return at night. Minato said, as the two elders nodded. He entered Sage mode before teleporting Makoto and Suna, appearing in the land of toads. The environment quickly settled around them, and soon came the characteristic sound of toads bubbling through all the lakes in the area. Well, let's greet the elders first. Minato said, as he saw Fukasaku and Shima at their home, sensing their chakra signatures. As they leaned, they had surely already noticed his chakra as well, and both immediately left the house. Minato boy. You're here. Fukasaku said. Hey, Chief. Minato smiled. He always liked calling him that, just like Naruto did. Minato boy, Jiraiya boy sent us a message. I wanted to know what's happening in Konoha. Fukasaku said, with concern. Sorry, you don't know what happened in the village? Look at my headband. Minato said. His sensei must probably already have been aware of the news about the night when many clans gathered and some fights broke out in the village, pressuring the Hokage and calling for a plebiscite in the village. Soon, Jiraiya sensei would also know about their departure, now that they were rogue ninjas. Fukasaku widened his eyes upon seeing Minato's headband, recognizing him as a deserter ninja. Well, in any case we'll talk more later. I'll have to train my two fiancés. One needs to adapt to her new eyes, and the second. I need to finally remove the seal of the Nine Tails and release Kurama. Minato said calmly. The two elder toads of Mount Mayaboku widened their eyes upon hearing Minato. Chapter 304, Transformation of the Nine-Tails Fox. Third-person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42. First, I want you to answer sincerely. I know you can also hear what she hears, Kurama. Minato said calmly, as he moved away from the central area of Mount Mayaboku, heading toward the place where Minato and the others always trained. The area was already completely destroyed due to the Rasengan's and also the fox's own chakra with Kushina. There had also been training with the giant summons with Hanabi, the Sage Mode battles that Minato and Suna had, as well as the Susanoo to wear down the last remnants of Makoto. Not to mention the half-cracked mountain that Minato and the Dragon Guren had removed, making it float in the air above the mount. If this area had once been used by the toads, it became taboo for them. No one approached it anymore since Minato began the unusual training there with the people he brought along. This place was marked mainly because Kushina had trained there before showing her power in the village. The Hokage and the others had no idea how she had mastered the fox's chakra to that level, given that all they knew about her was that she should be inside her house all the time being monitored by countless Umbu teams. That will always be a mystery for everyone in Konoha for a while, and they could probably even learn about it later from Jiraiya, when he asked the toads about Minato. Something that hadn't happened because Jiraiya never imagined that Minato would be at Mount Mayaboku in the last few months. That's why he never asked this question to the Toads while he was on his infiltration missions in the lands of the Cloud and Stone, something Minato discovered when he was an advisor and saw the mission documents to study a bit about the force used against Uzushi Ogakure. If Jiraiya-sensei had asked, he would have known that his student had not only mastered nature chakra to the point of creating a sage mode more powerful than his, but had also personally trained the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki to master her power and created other monsters in the form of beautiful girls. Minato looked at his fiancée in front of him after saying his first words. "I need to know if you and Kurama agree to fight together," he asked. "Yes, Databane. We're friends now," Kushina said proudly when she heard Minato's words, and he nodded, while Kurama was probably grumbling inside her. "Well, let's begin then," Minato said, while Makoto was at a distance watching them, though her eyes had not yet adapted enough to the daylight. They sat down, as Minato extended his hands. Normally it would be fist against fist, but since their relationship was more intimate, it was normal for them to hold each other's hands and squeeze them, as they sat in the lotus position, facing each other, holding hands, connecting the two. In the next moment, the scenery had changed, and Minato once again found himself in the vast flower field, which was Kushina's main mental image, as she appeared at his side right after, no longer just as a mental presence like the first time. Kushina was walking beside him this time. "Let's go," she said cheerfully, as she followed a path through the flower field until they reached the cave Minato still remembered from the first time he had been there. Upon entering, the dark environment immediately lit up, no longer as it was before, but instead as the forest Kushina had created for Kurama to live in while inhabiting her over the past months. Better than being in a large, damp, and dark place. The gate was still in the forest, since as they walked deeper into the woods, they saw the massive bars between the trees, created to keep the fox inside Kushina's body. And there was Kurama, stretched out between three trees, with her chin resting on her two hands, taking a nap. She eventually opened her red eyes and stared at Minato and Kushina as they approached. "It's been a while since I last saw you, Kurama. How have you been?" Minato asked. He occasionally asked Kushina about her relationship with Kurama in recent months, but he had never again entered her mental space. "No need for small talk," she said immediately. "So the time has come." She finished with that. "Yes. Will you be an ally in what's to come, Kurama?" Minato asked, still waiting for her answer. "Yes," she said in a dry tone, as if struggling with her own pride to say it. "Good, then let's begin. Since Mito gave me the key to the seal before having her last conversation with Kushina," Minato commented as he pulled out a scroll, revealing a mass of complex Fuinjutsu symbols as the scroll rolled out on the ground, displaying its contents. This was the key to Kurama's seal, something so complicated that, without it in full, no one could unlock the seal that bound the bijou. Mito had ensured that. Although opening the lock was one thing, the seal could still be destroyed if Kurama had taken over Kushina's mind or even if someone had enough power to remove the seal. Whether it was the Geto Mazo statue, or someone with brute force, they could also break the seal, but that would harm Kushina either way. Wasting no more time, Minato placed his hands on the scroll. It began to glow and was quickly absorbed, all the Fuinjutsu symbols flowing directly into the arm he pressed down, as the same symbols began to draw themselves around the limb, forming a series of tattoos. Kushina watched in silence, as did Kurama. No one said anything until Minato finished, finally standing up and leaving the now blank scroll aside, walking over to where the lock was. Then, he floated up to it, since it was several meters above the ground. He raised his hand, opening his fingers slightly forward. They began to glow, releasing purple chakra from the 5 tips. 5-point seal, release! Minato exclaimed, striking the lock with his 5 fingers. Quickly, his arms began to glow with the Fuinjutsu symbols from other encounters, which started being drawn directly into the tips of his fingers. When the last symbol disappeared, Minato twisted his hand as if it were a lock. In the next moment, a crack sounded and the lock reacted, beginning to release point by point until the middle part opened in the shape of a whirlpool. When the last one vanished, the gate began to open. Minato stepped back, landing beside Kushina, who wasn't watching cautiously, but instead with a smile. Kurama stretched her neck as she saw the gate finally being opened. Minato couldn't help but stay cautious, expecting any negative reaction from the fox, while silence took over the place, interrupted only by the sound of the gate creaking as it fully opened. It was Kushina, beside Minato, who broke the silence. "You're finally free, Kurama Databane," she shouted, raising her fist in the air in celebration. Kurama glared at her before clicking her tongue. In the next moment, when the gate fully opened, the bars began to vanish, vaporizing throughout the place. All the bars that imprisoned Kurama in the middle of that forest disappeared. "Well, I won't complain about that," Kurama said, grumbling, while Minato looked back and forth between him and Kushina, who was still laughing. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. It seemed the two had understood each other in the end exactly as he had imagined could happen. Not that he hadn't thought about it before, but he always needed to keep a sharp eye, in case Kurama attacked them or tried to escape Kushina's body. Minato would have been forced to intervene. "Now you can relax, brat." Kurama turned his attention to Minato. "I don't intend to run away. Why are you keeping your chakra raised all the time?" Minato looked at him before sighing a second time. "Well, I was a little worried, I admit. I didn't want anything to happen to Kushina," he said. "I said I would fight by her side, or the chosen one you claim is to come. But I am on your side. You kept your promise, and I intend to keep my word. I just hope you really fulfill the last part of the deal, to set us free," he said, while Minato nodded. "Yes, we'll do as we agreed. In any case, welcome back. Now I'd like you to be able to train with Kushina, so you can both learn to control an even more intense chakra and also the complete transformation of your body. Now, Kushina is a perfect Jinchuriki. Completely," Minato said. "And how about before that, I show you the rest of my mind? There's a huge garden out there," Kurama said. "The one with flowers?" "No, I'm not in the mood for that, Kurama," Kushina said, with a hint of disdain. "Ah, it's not that bad, Databane." Kushina laughed, seeming to enjoy Kurama's dark sense of humor. Minato didn't know what to say, but he didn't even have time to open his mouth. He felt something coming quickly. A pressure surged inside Kushina's mind and struck directly against her. She barely had time to open her eyes before feeling her hair lifted by a force pressing against her body from all sides. "What?" she exclaimed. "So it has begun," said Kurama, while Minato could feel the fox's chakra surging directly into Kushina with full force. Much more than she had ever used before, a power beyond what she was accustomed to showing. "Our chakras are assimilating. There are no more barriers between us. This is what it means to be a perfect Jinchuriki," said Kurama. Minato saw that even Kushina was losing control, as he was expelled from her mind. In the next moment, the scenery changed. An explosion of yellow chakra appeared before him, making him jump back before landing. Ahead, Kushina was still in the lotus position, but her body was bursting with chakra. He sensed Makoto heading toward them at that instant, realizing something was wrong. Kushina also opened her eyes, dazed. When she stood up, her yellow cloak began to shift, while an extra layer appeared. Marks and symbols started to form, 9 seals aligned side by side, in 3 columns of 3, drawing themselves on her back. She rose, still confused, feeling all the power she was receiving. "Damn it, Kurama, what are you doing?" Minato realized it wasn't just a forced transformation, but an attempt to trigger the first full transformation of the fox, something Naruto had also done as soon as he freed it. He didn't stop because he could feel everything would turn out fine with his haki. He then immediately turned and ran toward Makoto, grabbing her by the arm. "We'd better get out of here," he said, while behind them, an explosion of chakra erupted. Several massive tails formed, circling each other like a flower before opening and expanding upward, revealing the fox over 100 meters tall. She raised her head and roared across all of Mount Mayaboku. Roar! Fukasaku, who had already been worried upon learning that Minato intended to free Kurama, couldn't help but think the worst, even trusting in the blonde's abilities and knowing that Kushina had already mastered part of the fox's chakra. When the explosion of chakra burst on the horizon, his eyes widened. He saw the giant fox, not as red as he had imagined, but instead yellow, with strange, glowing symbols across its body. The toad's eyes widened even more, almost popping from their sockets, and he jumped back. "What?" he shouted, startled, while all the toads of Mount Mayaboku also watched, terrified, as they saw the nine-tails fox in their domain. Chapter 305, Hearing What No One Else Can Hear. Third-person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42. The fox roared for several seconds before finally calming down and lowering its head, while its front feet, which had risen during the roar, slammed against the ground, cracking it, and its tails cut through the air, swaying from side to side. It seemed to have stopped showing off, while Minato halted at a distance, landing with Makoto in his arm, analyzing the situation. He saw the same Kurama that Naruto and the original Minato had summoned in the Fourth Ninja War, yellow, covered in black stripes, a transformation completely different from all the other bijus. Which was strange. Minato wondered if this strange transformation, different from the other biju, was due to protagonism, since it didn't transform into its flesh and bone form. Instead, it was a pure massive chakra, which could have several advantages, such as expanding its chakra-made body in all possible ways, as long as one had creativity, or even regenerating, not to mention the brute strength and power, which remained the same. Kushina was on Kurama's head, as one would imagine, while she seemed stunned, her eyes desperate with the transformation that had not been her intention, but Kurama's. "What's going on?" she shouted with wide eyes, loud enough for even Minato to hear. She quickly began to calm down and return to the enormous body. It seemed that Kurama was speaking to her at that moment, and it was a mental conversation. "Wow, this is amazing, Kurama!" Then she exclaimed, seeming to accept the fact of her transformation, and laughed and found it incredible. "So big," Makoto murmured, as Minato finally set her down. "Sorry for holding you like that. I just wanted to be careful so you wouldn't get hurt because of your condition," Minato murmured. Makoto nodded. "No, it's okay. I was the one who rushed directly to you thinking something was wrong," she said, as she blinked her eyes again at the giant fox, still a bit blurred before the enormous mass of yellow chakra. "So Kushina transformed into this. And you say my Susanoo can rival that thing?" she said in a somewhat suspicious tone. She was already used to her Susanoo, but it was very small compared to a 100-meter beast of pure chakra. It felt a little less than a dream. "When the time comes, which will be soon, you'll change your mind. Anyway, let's see if she's okay," Minato said, as he moved forward, and Makoto came right behind. Kushina was still laughing and talking with Kurama, while she examined the enormous body she now had and could control, moving the tails and even the hands as she tested her own will over the chakra. She finally stopped paying attention and saw Minato and Makoto appearing below the giant head, as she waved at them, looking down. "Minato, look at me from up here, Databane," she shouted. "She seems to be having fun," Makoto murmured. "What else did you expect from Kushina?" Minato replied to Makoto, laughing, before smiling at the redhead above them. "Very well, Kushina, is everything okay up there?" Minato shouted. "Yes, but I think that due to the chakra explosion, all my clones in Yuzushiobikir were destroyed at the same instant," Kushina said. After all, the state of the main body affected the clones. No matter how many clones you have, the main body is always the central factor. As happened in the original work, when Naruto began to release the third tail after seeing Gaara dead and wanting to take revenge on Deidara, his clones began to be affected with a strong headache before disappearing at the same time. This also happens when the main user dies, which is no surprise. "I see," Minato commented, before focusing on Kushina. He wanted to test something and disappeared the next moment, leaving Makoto behind. But when trying to approach her with his teleportation, he felt as if he were hitting against a barrier, Kurama's own chakra being prevented from getting close. After using his space technique, Kushina was also surprised to see Minato teleporting and being unable to approach her. He spun in the air and adjusted himself to land on his feet. "Minato, are you okay?" asked Kushina, worried. Minato smiled. I am. I just wanted to know if the chakra would protect against my approach, and I see that it does. That's good, he said, satisfied with the defense that the chakra itself had imposed. That brat thinks he can just get close like that. Minato heard Kurama's voice, while Kushina laughed, also hearing the fox's dark humor. Right after, the chakra extended in the form of a giant hand from beneath the chin of the chakra fox, grabbing Minato before he was actually in danger. Kushina pulled him inside the chakra without him being blocked this time. Now you can enter, I allow it, she said, joking, before blinking as she noticed Minato looking thoughtful. Did something happen? She asked. Minato suddenly grew serious. I'll check something, wait a moment. Minato just looked at her and disappeared, appearing next to Makoto. Tell me something, Makoto. Did you hear Kurama's voice? He asked, while she stared at him, a little confused. No, she said. I see. Thoughtful, Minato narrowed his eyes and disappeared again, reappearing next to Kushina once more. Something wrong? She asked, a little worried by the strange way he was behaving. Minato gave a small smile. Well, let's just say I discovered something special, he spoke in a gentle tone. And what would that be? She asked. Even Kurama was watching him, wanting to know what he had discovered. It's not about you, Makoto. It's about me. Anyway, I can also hear your voice, Kurama. Minato said with a smile. That shouldn't be possible. Since I'm speaking inside Kushina's head, said Kurama. You can still say that I hear you, he declared. Anyway, it's good for you to train assimilation and complete transformation. I'm sure you won't last long, Kushina, but take advantage of this first moment to start getting used to it. It should get easier next time. That's all I know, after all, I'm not a Jinchuriki. Minato said. Leave it to me, Minato. Kushina replied, kissing him before he could say anything else. And thank you for everything, she said with a shy smile after pulling away from his lips. Tisk. They heard the fox grumble right after. Both looked at each other upon hearing that, before they started laughing. Anyway, now I'll give Makoto some proper attention, he said, before disappearing. Let's go somewhere else, he told Makoto as soon as he returned to her side. She just nodded when he disappeared with her at the touch of her hand, the next moment stopping where another of Minato's marks was, at a distance from that area. Minato also did this on purpose, after all, Gamabunta himself was leaping through Mount Mayaboku and approaching with a cautious look, while Kurama was still stretched out, talking with Kushina about the transformation. Minato saw the toad advancing through the sky before landing near them, making the ground shake with the impact as it raised a cloud of dust. Minato boy, on Gamabunta's head was Fukasaku, who jumped and went directly to Minato on the ground, looking at him worried. Minato boy, tell me, what's happening, he said, in an extremely worried tone. Minato smiled. Don't worry about a rampaging beast in your domain. Kurama is under Kushina's control. They're simulating for the first time, he assured. Fukasaku stopped for a moment before looking at the yellow fox in the distance, which remained still, only its tail swaying from side to side in the air. Are you sure? He asked, cautious. It's all right, Fukasaku. No need to worry about Kushina, she's already proven skillful enough to handle the chakra. Minato said confidently. After all, it wasn't just trust that Minato wanted to confirm that Kurama would be reliable with Kushina after being freed. He also wanted the girl to get used to the chakra. Kushina wasn't Naruto, who had the power of protagonism on his side. Things had to be handled rationally and carefully. Well, if you say so. Jiraiya will be speechless when he hears about this. Fukasaku replied. Minato smiled at that. Speaking of which, instead of waiting for him to reach the village, can you call him here? He asked. Fukasaku thought for a moment and nodded. Of course, we can bring him. But it would be good to warn him. Then warn him. Tell him we called and that I'd like to talk with him. Better he hears it from me than from reports, or even from the Hokage himself, who certainly won't spare his comments. since the old man might be hating me right now. Minato mocked, while Fukasaku nodded with his usual serious face. All right, we'll do that, Minato boy. We'll call Jiraiya boy, he said. Minato felt satisfied. Thank you, boss. Anyway, I'm going to train now with Makoto, so it would be good to leave this area, since Kushina is using the other one and we don't want to be caught in the middle of the impacts as she moves with that enormous body. Besides, I'll give you a heads up, Makoto might be able to create a body as large as Kurama's, also made of chakra. I won't explain now, but if you see it, you'll understand. Minato said. The toads didn't understand what he meant, but they didn't insist either. Alright then, let's return to the center of Mount Mayaboku, said Fukasaku, while Minato watched him jumping back onto Gamabunta's head. It's good that I won't have to fight that thing. Just don't let it get out of control. I wouldn't like to fight that fox, even if it's my duty, said Gamabunta, before simply leaping and moving in the opposite direction, distancing himself from the place. Well. Minato spoke in the middle of the dust that still lingered in the air. This will make a good training area, he said, looking at Makoto. Let's begin. Ignore Kushina for now. I want it to be just you and me, Makoto. All right. She said. One more thing, just be careful with our son, he said, and she gave him a smile. Of course, was all she said. Start with the basic Sharingan before we continue. Minato requested. Makoto activated her first eye. He asked for a short sparring session, training reflexes. Quickly, they began to fight in a controlled way, completely restraining their strength, only trading slow blows before starting to speed up, forcing Makoto's eye to adapt to the pace. Soon, she was already improving her reflexes. After about 10 minutes of combat, while Kurama leapt from side to side in the distance, explosive sounds echoing as her enormous body collided against the ground, Minato stopped. I think that's enough, he said to Makoto. Now I want you to release your Mangekyo Sharingan. She nodded, closing her eyes before opening them again, revealing the black pattern in the intense red, her normal Mangekyo, but now altered, with new designs in the pattern. This was the confirmation of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Now the time had come for Makoto to train that eye. Chapter 306, The Arrival of Jiraiya. Third-person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42. The training between Minato and Makoto was about to intensify when her eternal Mangekyo Sharingan was activated for the first time. However, Makoto's first reaction was to feel a sharp pain, closing her eyes immediately before kneeling down, while Minato was already at her side to keep her from getting hurt by the fall and to see her condition. Are you okay? He asked in a worried tone. I think so. It hurts, she admitted, while Minato continued looking at her. Kushina can help you with medical ninjutsu, he said. We need to call Kushina. But Makoto stopped him by placing her hand on his shoulder. No, Minato, it's fine. I'm just not used to it. These eyes are different from my regular Mangekyo. I'm just not used to it, she said. Minato turned his attention, staring at her, while she opened her eyes slightly, blinking several times before trying to adapt. Seeing this, Minato nodded. If she said she was fine, then he would believe her, while helping her to stand. I want you to take it easy, alright, he said, as she nodded. I want you first to use one of your abilities from that eye, see how it's reacting, he added. She nodded and raised her hand. A Chidori began to emerge, crackling all around. Minato just watched, while the blue lightning turned purple. He could feel that this lightning was much more dangerous and powerful than before. Makoto let the lightning shine for a while before deactivating it. I felt a slight pain, but I got used to it after a few seconds, she said. I can use this eye, she said. But there are still restrictions. Minato observed, and she did not deny it. Anyway, let's start with a simple fight. Let's see if your elements are stronger than before. Minato said. They had ninjutsu battles many times in that place to force her eye to go blind so she could implement the new Mangekyo. Makoto could transform her elemental jutsus into something more powerful than the ones Minato used.
When she activated this ability, she could enhance any element.
Since she had two, she turned blue lightning into something resembling storm style, with a purple hue, not as powerful as Madara Uchiha's special element, but still much stronger than simple lightning. Meanwhile, her fire style turned black, similar to Amaterasu, though it did not reach the level of those devouring flames. However, she always defeated Minato in a battle between her black flames and his red flames. You're probably going to gain a large amount of chakra, you'll be on the level of a bijou now. But you need to receive this little by little, especially because you have a child in your womb.
Minato said, starting to move away. The absurd amount of chakra was the minimum required to generate a giant Susanoo.
The user was supposed to receive an enormous amount of chakra when activating the Eternal Mangekyo, just as she had already received enough chakra to be compared to a Hokage when she activated the regular Mangekyo.
Mikoto nodded. She already knew this dynamic. While Minato was preparing, they would only use their abilities before attempting a Susanoo. Kushina was still enjoying her enormous giant body until she started to feel dizzy. Looks like this is our limit for now. Kurama spoke in her mind.
They had lasted a total of 10 minutes, which was impressive for their first transformation.
This isn't enough. Kushina murmured. Don't think like that.
If we were in a normal situation, where you weren't used to using my chakra and we tried this transformation, it probably wouldn't have lasted even 2 minutes, said Kurama.
But we didn't even use one of those abilities together, we just kept jumping around. Kushina was a little disappointed. How could she deal with several Biju and Hokages attacking the Uzumaki clan like this? That's why we're here training, isn't it? Isn't that why the boy brought you here? Rest. We'll continue later. Kurama replied. All right.
Thank you, Kurama, she said at last. They would have to practice more, while the chakra began to dissolve completely, turning into particles in the air, and Kushina fell to the ground, exhausted from the transformation, though it was more mental than physical. She landed inside, while she could hear explosions coming from the distance. She quickly advanced toward the location, knowing that Minato and Makoto were fighting, judging by the chakra they were releasing.
She easily recognized it as a sensory ninja.
As soon as she got a view of the fight, she saw black flames against red flames, with the black flames beginning to consume the red ones. She already knew these abilities, since she had spoken with Minato, but she couldn't help being amazed by the strength of Makoto's evolved element.
Minato had to teleport before the black flames consumed him.
Quickly, lightning began to shine, while Minato formed a Rasengan that clashed against Makoto's purple Chidori, after he rushed toward her.
Isn't this a bit over the top? Kushina murmured, unable to look away, fascinated by the battle, watching the two switch positions as they trained together.
The impact quickly exploded and spread in all directions like a gust of wind, reaching her even 200 meters away.
Makoto even managed to overpower Minato's Rasengan, at least in its most basic form, while Minato was pierced by Makoto, something he certainly allowed to happen. Again with this, Minato? Makoto said with a certain disgust, her hand buried in Minato's chest.
You know this doesn't hurt me, it's good to see your Chidori is powerful.
Minato said as if it were nothing. I'm not talking about this here. But what you made me go through to awaken my Mangekyo. You made me believe I was killing you.
She growled, with disgust.
Minato still remembered how she didn't speak to him for the next 2 weeks after the incident in the middle of the Second War. Anyway, let's take the fight more seriously, he said, and then entered Sage mode, his eyes turning yellow around them. Quickly, the fight balanced out. At that moment, with nature chakra added, Minato's jutsus became even more powerful. The fight went on for a while, until they finally stopped to rest. After spending the last hour launching jutsus at each other in all directions, the entire area within a 200-meter radius was affected, with flames still scattered around in several clouds of smoke. Minato appeared beside Makoto, near Kushina, a moment later. Let's take a break, he said, turning his gaze to Kushina. How was your transformation, he asked, as she displayed a proud smile. Kurama said we're just getting used to it. Let's try one more time, Kushina replied. Minato took out a scroll and pulled out some snacks, handing them to the girls to replenish their energy. We still have the rest of the morning. Let's just take a short break and continue. Do you think you can transform into the fox again? He turned to Kushina, who was sitting and eating a sandwich. I think I can. Even though I'm a little dizzy, I'll try doing it in the afternoon, she said. All right. Train with the new chakra cloak. If your speed increased with this second layer, your attacks should be even more powerful. I'll stay with Makoto for a while. Then we can train your speed. I'm sure it will be good training. Minato said. Perhaps Kushina couldn't compare to Naruto using the fox's second chakra layer, but she would certainly become even stronger than before, possibly even surpassing the other Hokages. Makoto wasn't much different either. If she managed to activate both abilities and use them naturally after getting used to them, she would be just as powerful. Not to mention that both could transform into their giant chakra forms, but although Kushina was ahead in that regard, Makoto would have some difficulty keeping up with her now. Even so, the potential was the same. For the rest of the morning, Minato trained with Makoto's second Mangekyo ability. Meanwhile, not far from there, in a well, a man emerged, jumping from the water and stepping onto solid ground the next moment. The well was just large enough for him to pass through. Fukasaku was already sensing his arrival and approached, standing in front of the man. Jiraiya boy, you came. Yes, I was returning to Konoha when I received the message, he said. He was stunned, to say the least, after hearing about his student joining several clans and pressuring the Hokage in front of the entire village. Something serious was happening in Konoha, and it was because of Minato. Even if they didn't give him that information directly, Jiraiya knew it. He didn't know what to say about it, he just wanted to reach Konoha as quickly as possible. Thus, he entered the Land of Fire again after years away, planning to arrive at the village the next day to understand how things were and what had happened with Minato, about whom he was also very worried. It was along the way that a toad was summoned near him, informing him that Fukasaku had sent a message saying that Minato was calling him to Mount Myaboku. Jiraiya wasted no time and accepted, entering the nearest portal that would take him straight to the Land of Toads. Well, Minato boy is still here training, said Fukasaku, while Jiraiya showed anxiety to see Minato and clarify everything that was happening. In the distance, he could hear rumbles, although he couldn't see due to the great waterfalls in front of the place. He's here training, he asked, surprised. Of all the places in the world, he chose Mount Myaboku? He's already been training here for months, if that's what you're asking. Fukasaku said. Seriously? Why didn't you tell me anything? Jiraiya said with a strange look. It seemed like the toads were hiding things from him. Minato had asked us not to say anything about it, since he knew you were on a mission and didn't want to bother you, said Fukasaku. Minato had requested silence about his training, not because he didn't trust Jiraiya, but because he wanted to keep as much information hidden as possible, especially from Konoha. He didn't want Jiraiya to have to choose between his student and loyalty to the village. Perhaps, if Jiraiya had asked, he would have been informed, or any toad would have told him during a mission summoning. But since Jiraiya was unaware of it, the question was never asked. In times of peace, there was no reason for Minato to summon toads from Mount Myaboku. He is my student, Jiraiya accused, glaring at Fukasaku. The toad merely shrugged. He received the elder's approval to train here. Since he asked us to keep silent, we did. Anyway, if you want to know why there are so many explosions, you should check for yourself. After all, it's easier for you to see than for me to try to explain, said Fukasaku. Jiraiya wasted no time. He quickly leapt between the waterfalls, advanced to the peak, and from there jumped onto a small rock, looking toward the open field. His eyes widened, stunned, as he saw the giant creature in the distance, a mass of yellow chakra. He hadn't noticed at first, but quickly recognized the nature of that chakra. And its form already gave it away. That's the nine-tailed fox, he exclaimed, seeing the tail swaying through the air, though it was calm, leaping from side to side. What is going on? Jiraiya murmured, unable to believe what he was seeing. At that very moment, a small yellow flash appeared half a kilometer from the fox.
He didn't know what it was, but it was a powerful mass of chakra. He saw the sword being swung against the ground and exploding, the echo resounding like a thunderclap. Jiraiya was speechless, observing this staggering scene before his eyes. Chapter 307, Jiraiya's Shock. Third-person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42. Minato was looking at the Susanoo in front of him. Mikoto was inside it. Her Susanoo was yellow in color, in the full torso form. It wasn't a giant Susanoo or even the smaller version with legs, this was just a test between them. She was maintaining her full form well, but she seemed fatigued, breathing with some difficulty as they continued training. Looks like that's all she can do today. After all, she doesn't even have her full vision yet. Minato murmured, sensing her struggle through his haki. She launched herself at him the next moment, while Minato vanished before the attack with the yellow blade. The ground was devastated as much as by an A or even S-rank jutsu. He appeared at a distance, observing the destruction. He had to admit that the power of a Susanoo was incredible, but it came with many disadvantages, since Susanoo was not as flexible as Kurama, who could create chakra and expand his body from any part of it. The Susanoo was a greater defense than Kurama's chakra could create, clearly, but it wasn't as versatile. Mikoto also had two swords, but they seemed to be generic weapons for all Susanoo. Maybe that wasn't her real weapon yet, since it varied a lot from the three Susanoo Minato knew. Madara had a sword that could cut through an entire region, devastating in a straight line and even slicing mountains miles away. Sasuke had two swords, but apart from the impact they could create in the area, they had no special ability. His full form in the first stage actually had a bow and arrow. And he created a powerful jutsu strong enough to become a lightning arrow when he reached his peak. However, Sasuke's Susanoo was still normal when it only held the two swords. It had no special abilities, perhaps him wielding Amaterasu in his blades was that sub-ability Minato didn't know. Even Obito's Susanoo, the one Kakashi had unleashed, had two ninja stars as weapons, which had the Kamui ability, taking anything they struck into another dimension. Minato seemed far too interested in his theories about the Susanoo, when Mikoto appeared in front of him, raising her sword. Minato stared at her before the blade advanced toward him. He dodged in the next instant, disappearing effortlessly, and reappearing at a distance. Very well. Minato said, raising his hand, as a sphere of chakra began to form, none other than the Rasengan. This Rasengan was more powerful than usual, since he was infusing it with Sage Mode chakra. Come, Mikoto. I want to test something. He declared, staring at her with a serious look. She nodded and charged at him, while he waited, ready for the attack to come. The blade advanced toward him, while he charged forward, breaking the ground with his legs from the force, and raised his hand, striking against Susanoo's blade with his Rasengan. The impact generated an explosion in all directions. Minato did not retreat, despite being in the air against a heavy blade. He held firm as the collision spread a gust of wind. Minato and Mikoto exerted themselves, and even though Mikoto was trying to press him. Since he himself had told her not to hold back during training and to come with the intent to kill him, she saw her Susanoo falter and retreat backward, before an explosion erupted as the force of the clash dissipated. Minato remained in the air with his Rasengan, which faded at the same time the yellow Susanoo began to fall back. Minato spun in the air before preparing again. Mikoto was fast enough to regain balance and used the other hand with her sword, trying to strike him. He smiled as the blade came at him, while time seemed to move in slow motion, with him dodging the blade by leaping gracefully over it. He saw the blade miss through the air before taking a step back with Jeppo and landing on the ground, looking at Mikoto. Minato quickly drew his own sword from a seal on his bracelet, used to store his belongings. Let's fight with swords now, he declared as his blade turned black, using armament haki. Mikoto nodded and charged at Minato once more, while he merely stood still before the two blades Mikoto wielded struck the ground with such force that the explosion echoed throughout the entire region. Even Mikoto grew concerned as she saw the ground being destroyed with Minato there. He didn't seem to have left the spot, and she searched for him everywhere, but could also sense his chakra still right in front of her, raising his hand. Her gaze turned astonished as the cloud of smoke dissipated before her. The scene revealed Minato standing, raising his black blade against the two swords of the Susanoo, while holding firm on the ground. Minato was using only armament haki to stay strong against the weight of the attack, while the Susanoo still tried to force him down.
Well, this is fun. Minato couldn't help but say, standing firm and handling the situation well.
In the next instant, he vanished, reappearing at a distance still holding his sword, while Makoto Susanoo's two blades clashed against the ground, with him no longer there to stop them. Surely it will be fun to fight with my blade against giant swords,
Minato said, with a challenging look. Makoto raised an eyebrow. It seemed the training was over. However, we can't continue. There's a special guest today at Mount Mayaboku.
He's coming here, so it's best we stop for today, Minato said, beginning to store his blade, which disappeared into the seal on his bracelet.
Makoto raised an eyebrow. She wasn't a sensory ninja like Minato or Kushina, so she didn't notice immediately. However, he could already imagine who was there. Jiraiya was only noticed by her when he landed nearby, looking at the two of them with an incredulous expression as he touched down more than 100 meters away. Makoto dispelled the Susanoo, her face showing the exhaustion. "Sensei," she murmured. Minato opened a small smile and took Makoto, disappearing with her and reappearing beside Jiraiya with another smile. "Hello, Sensei. It's been a while," Minato said.
Jiraiya stared at him as if he had two heads.
"Minato," he murmured. Minato could understand his reaction.
"Sensei, how good it is to see you again. I hope we can talk a little,"
Minato said, while Jiraiya only nodded, still unsure what to say. He looked at Makoto. "Makoto," he murmured.
"Well, I said he would be bewildered," Fukasaku said beside them, as if already accustomed to the scene. Kurama was at a distance and could see Kushina looking at them, debating whether she should transform or not to join, since she had also sensed Jiraiya as quickly as Minato after he entered Mount Mayaboku. In the end, the chakra of the huge Kurama dissipated, and Kushina rushed to them still wrapped in a cloak, using her super speed to arrive in an instant. However, she couldn't control her force well and began to break a pile of rocks when she had to brake, stopping while several shards flew toward the group.
"Oops, sorry about that,"
Kushina laughed, as she dispelled the chakra. She then turned her attention to Jiraiya, who was still staring at them. "It's been a while," Jiraiya said, the words escaping almost unconsciously. "Makoto, you've learned new skills," he then looked at Kushina.
"And you've become a perfect Jinchuriki,"
he said incredulously. He had only been away from the village for a few years, and suddenly the girl who had replaced Mito had already surpassed her predecessor, at such a young age. His gaze fell on Minato.
"And you? Is that Sage Mode?
But without the deformities." He seemed to want to accuse the student, seeing Minato's body much better than his when using that power, while Minato hadn't even noticed he still had the mode active from the fight with Makoto. He dispelled it, his eyes returning to their normal blue.
"You could say we've been through a lot, Sensei."
"Well, we're just training here," Minato said, while Jiraiya raised his gaze and sought his forehead protector. He couldn't help but furrow his brow when he noticed the mark cutting through the leaf symbol. The words escaped before he could stop them.
"Minato, why?"
The student's face turned more serious as he stared at his teacher.
"Because we need to help the Uzumaki, Sensei," he said.
"The village refused to do so, so we did what had to be done. After all, we're going against the village's decision. It's practically treason. And also, our actions are independent of Konoha. That's why we allied ourselves as rogue ninjas, so the consequences are ours alone and not the village's, in future problems."
Jiraiya didn't know what to say as his student spoke firmly.
"Why don't we talk first, Sensei? There are some things I'd like to clarify with you. And I'm sure you'll want an explanation as well."
Minato then turned to Makoto and Kushina.
"I'll talk to him first," he said, as they nodded, seeing that Jiraiya was still in shock.
"Fukasaku, I'm sure they're hungry. Why don't you ask Shima to prepare some delicious slugs and worms for my fiancés? I'm sure they'll appreciate it." They're very nutritious, Minato said. Fukasaku's eyes lit up. Ah, of course.
I'm sure Mother will love having visitors at home,
the old toad said, excited. Makoto and Kushina made obvious grimaces, while Minato hid a small smile, clearly having done it on purpose.
He couldn't lose his sense of humor, and when he received the hateful look from his fiancées, he only laughed. In any case, Minato pulled out a scroll.
Here, enough food for you,
he said, before jumping closer to Jiraiya and approaching him. I know it's all quite disconcerting, but let me explain my story, sensei.
Many things have happened since you left to be the teacher of those children in the land of rain.
Jiraiya only nodded, while his student touched his shoulder and vanished along with him. Kushina immediately looked at the top of the mountain that Guren had once raised from the ground in her dragon form. She could feel that they had gone there. Meanwhile, Minato and Jiraiya were indeed at the top of the mountain.
Jiraiya was beginning to sweat, finally letting out a heavy sigh.
It was too much information to absorb at once.
Sensei, how have you been? Minato asked, sitting on the ground.
Jiraiya stared at him, still not knowing what to say, until he did the same, sitting in front of him, studying him as if he were facing a new person.
Minato, why did you do this?
Why did you leave the village? He asked, full of concern and even with a touch of disappointment. To Minato, this might have been the same feeling he had when Orochimaru abandoned the village in the original story. After all, Jiraiya had gone after his old companion just as Naruto had gone after Sasuke.
Well, let me explain what really happened.
With nothing more to say, Jiraiya simply nodded, waiting for the student to tell him everything. It would have been easier if Minato had become a villain that was simpler, but Minato left the village seeming to fight for what he believed in, and it was more complex than it initially seemed. Minato opened a small smile and began to speak, starting from when he took on the position of commander of Camp 12, in Jiraiya's place, when he returned to the village after the war, discovering the schemes that the Kage Council was conducting. At the same time, he began to plan how he could help the Uzumaki, even if it was a decision against the Hokage's agreement with the other village leaders.
Chapter 308, We Are the Puppets. Third-person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42.
Jiraiya spent an entire hour with Minato on top of the mountain, while Minato explained the whole situation since they had separated in the Second War. Minato had gone to the camp on the northern border to train with Might Due, after the Hokage's authorization to develop the 8 gates.
As Jiraiya already knew, at the same time he was doing some services in the name of Tsukumo Hatake on the border.
Later, as the general commander of the northern border camp, Tsukumo passed the information that Jiraiya had stayed to train the children in the land of rain. Minato had not told Jiraiya that he had already met Nagato even before leaving the camp to go north on one of his missions in the land of rain. That was because he couldn't simply reveal something so extraordinary without raising his sensei's suspicions regarding his knowledge. It would be very strange to say something like,
"Ah, you know that child you met with the legendary Rinnegan and are training? I also met him.
In fact, I also fed him more than any other civilian I helped during the years I spent there in the war."
Minato could have helped the boy more at the time, but he couldn't simply take Nagato and leave the land of rain.
Besides having Danzo and Hiruzen with ambitious eyes on the Rinnegan, that would also attract the eyes of Madara and Zetsu, when Minato was still weaker than he was now. Even at this moment, it would be a problem to have them pursuing him, with Minato taking possession of the old Madara's eyes. And he would certainly be furious. Not that Minato couldn't survive almost everything that old man would send against him, but the people around him would be in great danger, and Minato could no longer grow stronger in secret. It would also be good if Konan and Yahiko could meet Nagato and create the bond they had in the original story. Minato only hoped that, with the food in the scroll he had given to Nagato, with a storage Fuinjutsu that even civilians could use, he would not suffer as much, but would somehow still meet his 2 future friends. Minato only intended to interfere at the moment when Yahiko would be killed, when Nagato would summon the Geto statue for the first time. He had to be alert to this event, not only to save Yahiko but also to bring Nagato to his side. After all, Obito had exterminated all of Akatsuki's companions so that no one would help Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan, turning it into a very different organization from the initial proposal.
It became a group of S-rank rogue ninjas, hunting bijus.
Furthermore, Obito's fate would also be changed, for Minato would not let him become corrupted.
And he did not know how that would impact the world, but one thing he was sure of. Madara Uchiha would not stand still and would find some disciple one way or another.
Anyway, back in the present, Minato had finished his last words. After telling what had happened in Konoha, he explained that he returned to the village as a hero after many events both on the northern border and when he became the best camp commander throughout the war. He was not the only one declared a hero, as were Tsukumo and his two other teammates of Jiraiya, and even himself, but he was absent, and Tsunade also did not participate in the event as she was mourning Dan. However, Minato did not accept sacrificing the Uzumaki clan just for peace at the Hokage summit when he heard that, while innocent people would die. People who had fought alongside Konoha in the war were about to be betrayed by the very village, stabbed in the back.
How could Minato accept such things?
That is why, from the beginning, Minato planned to interfere. He schemed everything while the village suspected nothing. He trained Kushina, Makoto, Tsunade, and Hanabi, while also seeking his own strength until he was ready to act according to his plan. The Hokage and Danzo had their eyes on him the entire time, and it did not help when the Hokage changed his team after having proof that ninjas from other villages were planning something with the Uzumakis.
Minato was placed in a team entirely formed by Danzo. This ensured that he would be watched, and, at the right moment, they would try to kill him. He acted without raising any suspicion, while strengthening his companions. When they set up an ambush allied with the Kazekage, not only did they fail to kill him, but few survived. Minato struck down entire squads as if they were nothing. Elite ninjas, Anbu, Root, and even the greatest ninjas of Suna were slaughtered like animals while trying to survive his overwhelming power, with only a few spared by his mercy. In the end, he returned at night to Konoha after spending the rest of the day trying to kill Orochimaru, while the snake used substitutions the entire time only to die the next instant, before remaking his body. In the end, the decision came when the most powerful clans of the village, mostly, rallied behind Minato. Pressured, the Hokage had to give in. Danzo's crimes and the reach of Hiruzen's own hands had been exposed, and he was judged by the village, forced to resign from his position as advisor. Like the others, he would remain for a few more days, but soon he would be removed from the village's highest post. When the village decided to preserve itself and maintain peace instead of helping the Uzumakis, Minato also decided to disassociate himself from it, tearing off his headband and coming to the Uzumaki clan, not knowing how long he would remain away from Konoha. And now, they were there talking on Mount Mayaboku. Jiraiya sighed upon hearing that the Kazekage had died, but had no information about who had done it. I intercepted one of the messages to Iwagakure. The village of Suna reported that the Kazekage was dead and that they would delay launching their attack against Uzushi-Ogakure. They did not mention that their Hokage had been assassinated, much less that you were the author, Minato. Jiraiya remarked without saying much more. He didn't know what to say about everything he had heard. Minato had not lied to him, he could feel it. He spoke of things that even surprised Jiraiya. One of them was revealing that he had tried to kill Orochimaru dozens of times, while cutting, tearing his body apart, and delivering lethal blows. Orochimaru had always been on the defensive, losing body after body and having to use a great amount of chakra to recover. Jiraiya could understand that, if Minato had continued back then with the immense amount of chakra he possessed now, Orochimaru would have reached his limit and might have died at the hands of his student. Something Jiraiya did not want to hear. After all, he saw Orochimaru as his companion, as a friend. He would never wish for either of them to be killed by the other and would try to prevent that at all costs. I'm sorry for my absence. So many bad things happened. Jiraiya lowered his head as he said these words in a sad tone. Minato then touched his shoulder. There's no reason for you to feel guilty about this, sensei. Minato began. And you know that none of this is your fault or because of your absence. I missed you ever since I knew you would stay in the land of rain. I wanted you to be in the village when they called you a war hero, when you earned the title of legendary Sannin. You deserved it. He said, trying to help Jiraiya recover.
I didn't do anything close to what I saw you do in the war, Minato.
You waited for me for a long time. Maybe I was never truly a teacher to you,"
Jiraiya said with a sad smile.
"How can you say that, sensei? You were with me even back in the academy. Do you remember the tips you gave me while I trained in the forests, in the most remote parts of Konoha's center?
You were there, giving me advice that no one else could give me. After all, I never came from a clan to receive privileged techniques or the training of some associated jonin.
You acted as my sensei even back then.
Outside the ninja academy, you taught me to spy, the subtle art of infiltration, as well as the jutsus you passed on to me. Not to mention the contract with the Toad clan. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to do half of the things I achieved here on Mount Mayaboku. I learned Sage Mode, which is also an extension of the contract. The contract you made me sign with my blood, Jiraiya-sensei." He stopped and observed how Jiraiya would react to his words.
Jiraiya had to open a smile, acknowledging the words of his student.
Perhaps he truly had been left behind by him a long time ago. However, wasn't it the greatest satisfaction of a master to see that his disciple, now so powerful, still recognized him as his teacher and would remain faithful to that? That he cited every lesson he had learned, and looked at him as his true sensei. Although they had stayed together less than 2 years, although they had only done one S-rank mission before the war, and most of the time had been on the battlefield. While Jiraiya had to handle entire documents as the main leader of the camp and of that northern border and could not feel satisfied with the time he spent with Minato, since much of it was spent dealing with administrative matters. Still, he was comforted by the words of his student. Maybe he even saw Jiraiya as a father figure with those blue eyes looking at him with respect? Minato was an orphan, perhaps Jiraiya had played that role, however briefly it lasted. One day you will have a student, and that apprentice will have the destiny to make great changes in the ninja world. The old toad's words echoed in Jiraiya's mind. The same feeling had hit him when he decided to train those children from the rain and discovered that the Uzumaki boy had hidden his Rinnegan the whole time. When he saw those eyes, after a ninja trying to attack his pupils fell dead beside Nagato, who had unconsciously used the power of his eyes, Jiraiya had felt that too. He could not deny that he felt satisfied inwardly, for having had 2 incredible pupils whom he had the honor of teaching, and that both seemed to want a better world. However, among those 2, Jiraiya had to admit, Minato was the closest to being the boy of prophecy that the elder had foretold. Even sad, he was no longer disappointed after hearing Minato's reasons for being there with the scratched headband and officially as a missing nin. He only felt sorrow that he had left the village to follow what he believed to be right. It was a much heavier burden than Jiraiya wished Minato had to carry. Still, Jiraiya should have been in the village, not to judge or stop his student, but to support him, to give advice, to find a solution so things would not have to reach that point. Jiraiya might have eased the guilt of not having spent more time with Minato, but he still felt he had failed as a teacher when his student was facing the weight of an entire village. What kind of teacher was he in the end? "Sensei, I don't think you should feel that way either." Minato acknowledged Jiraiya's sad look trapped in his thoughts, then closed his smile, as if reading Jiraiya's mind. "I just don't think things would have been very different. You know how stubborn your teacher is." He left the decision about the Uzumaki to the village as a whole, like a plebiscite. He knew people, in general, would fear the idea of war again. And I can't even blame them. People died all the time in the Second Great Ninja War: sons, parents, brothers, relatives, friends, lovers. Everyone suffered some kind of loss, and I saw many people I knew die. It was a true disaster. It's obvious that everyone would preserve peace. No one could endure war anymore. Not even I. However, unfortunately, there is no guarantee that a new war won't break out, even if the Uzumaki are destroyed by the agreement of the other nations. They may see Konoha further weakened, they would attack again, and chaos would begin a third time on this continent. That's why I cannot let the Uzumaki clan die while I sit idly behind Konoha's walls," Minato said, while Jiraiya relaxed a little, watching him pull back his arm and cross it again while still sitting in front of him. "I still wish I had been there too, Minato. If I had known about this, since no one told me anything. You could have called me as well, like you did here.
Jiraiya replied, a bit annoyed, but without the same sad mood as before. How could I do that, sensei? You would have had to choose between the village and your pupil. Besides, you were on an infiltration mission. How could I burden your mind with my problems? This was something I yielded to, something I decided to do on my own. I didn't want to involve more people. Still, you managed to make all your girls from Konoha follow you. I won't lie, Minato, you're better at love than I am. Jiraiya started laughing, lightening the mood. After all, to make 4 girls abandon everything in Konoha to be by your side, even while being seen as traitors, it must have taken a very strong bond for them to accept that. I can only say they love you, not 1, but 4. I can't complain about that, sensei. I have companions better than I could ever ask for. Minato said with a warm smile. You are certainly blessed, Minato. The only woman I loved rejected me and married another man. Jiraiya said, returning to a more melancholic tone. Minato pressed his lips together. It was obvious he was talking about Tsunade. We don't always get what we want, sensei, Minato began carefully. It was a delicate subject for Jiraiya. I know you loved her, and still love Miss Tsunade. But couldn't you move on? We don't always get what we want, sensei. She is already bound to Dan, and I bet she won't be with anyone else in this life, waiting to reunite with him in the other world. Minato said. It was obvious there was another world where the dead met. Perhaps that was why so many people preserved their old relationships, even when they became widows or widowers, never getting involved again, so they could meet their loved one in the afterlife. After all, Tsunade had never had another lover in the original story, at least, it was never specified. And when she met Dan after the Edo Tensei, she changed her tone of voice to that of a love-struck girl. Very different from the old and hardened woman she had become when she took the role of Hokage. I try, Minato. I've been trying for many years, but I still can't. Jiraiya said, still in his melancholic tone. Minato pressed his lips together, he had nothing more to say about it. And it was Jiraiya who tried to move away from that uncomfortable mood. At least my student swept your daughter off her feet and even made her run away from the village with him. Well, as they say, the master's flaws must be surpassed by his pupils. Jiraiya laughed at his own comment. Minato remained calm as he looked toward Mount Mayaboku beyond Jiraiya in front of him, filled with giant pillars and lakes in the distance. Waterfalls cascaded down, and even the giant toads could be seen as small dots here and there. You know, sensei. Minato began. Do you know why I'm helping the Uzumaki clan, even if I become a criminal and traitor to all the nations? It's because something big is happening. I encountered 2 Uchiha on the border, both with the Mangekyo Sharingan, powerful eyes that only a few Uchiha have ever achieved in history. And they were 2 former academy classmates. Minato continued, while Jiraiya was surprised but remained silent, just listening with a more serious look. I also found strange creatures, ones I couldn't sense before, but somehow I could now with my unique abilities. While no one else could perceive them, they were there, moving through the earth, watching Konoha, the borders, everything, perhaps even other villages without anyone noticing, and there's no doubt they are behind the disappearance of dozens of Uchiha in the Second War when no one could find any proof. They themselves helped the 2 Uchiha escape when I found them. I feel that something big is happening behind the curtains that everyone can normally see, something that neither Konoha, Sunagakure, Iwagakure, Kirigakure, nor Kumogakure can understand. Everyone is blind, while there are people moving the world as if it were a grand stage, and we are the puppets, sensei. Minato said with a serious tone, while Jiraiya's expression also grew grim upon hearing that. No one in the ninja world had ever said something like that to Jiraiya. Minato seemed to know something more than anyone else, as if he had access to knowledge he shouldn't have. A hidden enemy. One who manipulates the entire world through small actions, hiding behind the will of an old man underground. Or perhaps the true enemy is the one sealed within the moon, later released as the Ghetto statue? Or someone somewhere in this world trying to recover for over 1,000 years? Or even those beyond the stars, wanting to know why the chakra fruit never returned from this world. Minato continued gazing at the horizon, searching for answers to his inner questions,
contemplating the view on the other side.
Chapter 309, We Will Win, Sensei. Third-person POV. Mount Mayaboku, Year 42. Obviously, Minato said nothing about his last thoughts, he only remained silent, while Jiraiya even waited for some answer. However, his student did not proceed either because he didn't know, or wouldn't tell, believing it was the first option. Meanwhile, Minato kept silent because he knew that, if he talked too much, he would address topics he couldn't explain, like how he had that knowledge. There were limits to the knowledge he could pass on to someone else. How could he inform that there was a group of aliens out there wanting to absorb all the chakra from the planet? Anyway, he only spoke again by changing the subject. Leaving that aside, Sensei. I think you managed to understand and know that we're not going back to the village, right? So let's return to the others. I'm sure Makoto would still like to talk to you too. After all, we're still Team 7, right? Said Minato, looking at Jiraiya, who ended up nodding. Yes, you're right. It's just still hard to swallow all this. Jiraiya murmured. Well, I already told you that you shouldn't blame yourself. You have nothing to do with the village's decisions. Just be careful not to say you saw me. After all, the village may demand why you didn't tie me up and aren't taking me back to the village right this moment. Minato laughed, while Jiraiya showed a smile, as if Minato didn't know it wasn't something easy. I could only say that my student had surpassed me, said Jiraiya, also getting up from his seat. But there's one more thing I wanted to discuss with you, Minato. Jiraiya spoke again and looked at him before he could release his teleportation jutsu to return to where Kushina and Makoto were. And what would that be? Minato stared at him. You know the danger that you and your companions are facing fighting for Yuzushiyogakure. I know it's unsettling, to say the least, when Kushina has the power over the Nine Tails and your companions with many incredible abilities. But still, Minato, I saw the forces that the alliance between the nations was sending. Kages, Bijus and their Jinchurikis, elite ninjas and a very large number of them, all the nations will be heading to Yuzushiyogakure. Do you have any idea of the danger you are putting yourself in? Said Jiraiya, with a worried tone. And Minato's response upon hearing this, was to open a smile. I do know. I know very well that we run the risk of facing great danger. However, even so, we are prepared for a lot. Trust your student, who also has trust in his companions, said Minato with pure confidence. He could even understand Jiraiya's concern. After all, as much as he had that level, a level of power that crushed Konoha itself, he would still be fighting against armies of 4 of the 5 great elemental nations, Kages at the same time and several Bijus. It was quite exaggerated. It was a battlefield very different from what he faced in the Leaf Village. But would that make Minato back down? Of course not. It would be a definitive opportunity to see how far he could go with his powers. As far as he could go. He did not have complete mastery over his haki. Although he could knock down a dozen people with the Conqueror, he could not change an entire war, knocking down thousands of ninjas, or even use the voice of all things ability that he had realized just a few hours ago he also possessed. When he heard Kushina speaking with Kurama mentally, even he could hear it, which was clear proof that he had that ability from the world of One Piece as well. Even so, he had enough power to handle and survive the war. He had techniques, jutsus, unique abilities, and summons that could help him in many scenarios. So Minato wasn't even worried, even if he were alone. He could help the Uzumaki clan deal with their war and would do everything to ensure they survived. But now he couldn't complain about his powerful companions who were by his side. With them, everything would be much easier. Jiraiya stared at him for a moment before nodding, seeing a tone of confidence in Minato's words. Although he was still worried, he believed in the feelings his student conveyed. Perhaps he was much more powerful than Jiraiya could imagine. He teleported from the top of the mountain and reappeared at the bottom, where Makoto and Kushina were eating, while Fukasaku was standing, seated on a rock, since they didn't need to go to Shima to eat, sparing the girls from tasting larvae and weird things that no one but the toads liked. Minato, you're back. Kushina said happily, though her words came out a little crooked with her mouth still full of food. Eat first, Kushina. Then talk.
Minato sighed, seeing her a little clumsy, while Makoto ate with delicacy and grace.
Well, we had a brief conversation. And Sensei will be our accomplice for now, since he won't report anything to the village. Minato said, joining the girls. It's been a long time since you left. Sensei, how have you been? Makoto asked him.
Well, he began, scratching his head. I was handling some things, and writing a new novel.
You have to read this one, Minato. It's different from the ones I usually make,
said Jiraiya.
Minato lifted his gaze to him. So it's not an erotic book? He asked calmly. Kushina, hearing this, blushed. Makoto also had a reddish tone on her cheeks, but, as always, less expressive, though still embarrassed. Erotic? Minato, do you by any chance read erotic books? Kushina asked, shocked. Even Makoto looked at him blushing. No, that's not my thing.
Minato made a grimace before looking at his sensei in an offended tone.
Jiraiya shook his head. Well, that would be a shame. After all, my books are quite famous,
he said, to finish, but Minato shook his head. The chance of his sensei being a lost case was great, since the only books he sold were erotic, inspired by peeking at hot springs, being his sensei's research. Although, Minato only remembered Kakashi reading that book, but couldn't remember anyone else.
Anyway, what is this new book about? Minato asked, while Jiraiya sat down beside him and grabbed something to drink with the two.
Well, if you want to know, it's about a hero wanting to save the world, change it completely, and find true peace, where people could understand one another. He faces challenges that seem impossible, but what puts him on the right path is that he never gives up, no matter how difficult the answer to what he seeks may be.
Jiraiya said. Minato raised an eyebrow, obviously knowing very well what that book meant.
It had been written when Jiraiya was training with the children in the Land of Rain.
And Nagato himself had liked the name. Jiraiya himself was inspired by Nagato to write it. Really? Minato asked. What's the name of the main character?
He questioned with feigned curiosity. The main character is named Naruto.
He embarks on the journey to change the world,
said Jiraiya, before looking to the side, surprised, while Kushina simply began to stammer upon hearing the name.
Are you okay, Kushina?
Makoto asked in surprise, while Kushina seemed unable to breathe, choking on her own food after jumping when she heard the name. Minato could even hear Kurama, and the fox wasn't worried about Kushina, but was also reacting to the name Jiraiya had mentioned. Since Kushina must have told her at some point about the vision Minato had shown her and about their future son together.
Naruto. Naruto is his name? Asked Kushina, louder than she should have after recovering.
Jiraiya scratched his head again, finding her reaction a bit strange.
Yeah. I was eating ramen when I thought of that name. It's just any name.
But one of my pupils, whom I was training in the rain, said he liked the name.
He even said he would like to be this Naruto, commented Jiraiya, a little embarrassed. Naruto is not a bad name, Minato said, while casting a glance at Kushina.
She returned it with a look of recognition.
Makoto stared at the two with narrowed eyes, not understanding what that interaction was, while Jiraiya didn't even notice. Well, you still haven't told us everything, Sensei. Share with us what has been happening with you in the last few years, Makoto asked, as the subject changed.
Jiraiya nodded and began to recount about training the children in the rain, speaking of his dreams, of the desire to change the country destroyed by the Three-Front War. The villages had used the place itself as a battlefield, both Konoha, Suna, and Iwa, with all three sending troops for a war that devastated almost everything near the borders, while people retreated as far away as possible, but many did not make it and a good part of those who survived were dealing with misery. Trade had been interrupted, and a large part of the country's crops had been destroyed or stolen by ninjas from other countries. The children were trained, while Jiraiya believed that they would be ready to deal with the problems on their own. Afterwards, he left them and continued traveling the world, wanting to write more about his book. Later, he received a message from his sensei, the Hokage, informing him that there was an urgent mission to investigate the nations. Thus, he went from country to country, looking for what might be wrong. He got his answer as soon as he began to hear rumors about experiments being carried out by the villages, beginning to gather entire armies, training military tactics, while their shinobi, and even some jinchurikis, were undergoing intense training. He investigated and, later, discovered that they were about to fight and destroy the Uzumaki clan. He reported all this to Konoha long before it happened. Even so, Hiruzen did nothing. That was why, after hearing Minato's story, Jiraiya was more inclined to trust him than his former sensei, who, after all, had also disappointed him over the years. They talked a lot while the day began to end, and Minato decided to return to the Uzumaki, not being able to stay any longer. As he stood up, not everyone yet knew what he meant to the clan. "We will return soon, if it's not a problem. Kushina will train her healing form here," Minato asked calmly, while the chief toad nodded. "Of course, Minato boy. You can already use this place. After all, it's uninhabitable ever since you started coming here," he said, looking at all the destroyed terrain. There was no way for anyone to occupy that place, so, if it was to be used for training, they might as well use it. Minato then turned to Jiraiya. "Well, sensei, I don't know how the village is at this moment with our departure, but there is nothing more to be done, not even sending reinforcements to Uzushiogakure. We will be facing the nations head-on in the coming days," Minato said, while Jiraiya nodded. "I should be there with you, Minato. With all of you," he said. After all, he was still the leader of Team 7. The team had not been dissolved, even if Minato, Makoto, and Hanabi hadn't been working together lately as a team, since they had joined the ANBU. There's nothing to say about that. We'll talk later, when all this mess is over. Sensei, I don't wish to leave the village. Konoha is still my home. But even so, I'm here because I need to be," Minato said, while Jiraiya recognized his determination. "All right, my disciple. I just want you to stay alive. Promise me that you will all return alive. If things get worse, you must flee immediately," Jiraiya said in the end. Minato had the teleportation jutsus. If it ever came to the point where Uzushiogakure was inevitably destroyed, at least his students should be saved. "Don't worry about that, sensei. We won't need to resort to that," Minato said, with confidence. In the end, Jiraiya only nodded. "Let's go." With that, Minato touched Makoto and Kushina before disappearing, after gathering enough nature chakra to use in the Raijin. Jiraiya remained there with Fukasaku, since he would have to use the portal through which he had come to return. "Damn, how is it that he can use Sage Mode just by changing his eyes, and I end up with an ugly appearance enough to make any woman run from me?" said Jiraiya, discouraged. After all, Minato had the privilege of using nature chakra and only changing his eyes, while he had to transform his skin, hands, and feet, looking like a grotesque toadman. In addition, he also needed Fukasaku and Shima to concentrate the nature chakra, while Minato simply did it in seconds, standing in the same place. Minato hadn't even trained with Fukasaku and Shima on his shoulders. He himself had said he would never need to, being able to use clones with the same theory that Naruto would use, if he needed to replenish nature energy. "You only say that because you haven't seen that monster in action. He learned Sage Mode in just a few attempts," mocked Fukasaku, still remembering the trauma of seeing Minato mastering Senjutsu as if he were going to the park. "What? In just a few attempts?" Jiraiya couldn't help but shout, having the same reaction Shima had when she heard from Fukasaku about the result of Minato's training on the first day. He had taken months, and Minato, only a few attempts? What kind of absurdity was that? Chapter 310, The Answer for Konoha. Third-person POV. Uzushiogakure, Year 42. It was already night when Minato, Makoto, and Kushina returned to the Uzumaki clan, while Minato immediately stopped the moment they arrived at the house where they were staying within the clan. At the same instant, Tsunade was the first to appear, opening the door to the living room where they were as soon as she sensed them. "You finally arrived," she said, before looking at Kushina.
Did you know that your clones suddenly disappearing all around the clan scared some of the Uzumaki shinobi who were helping you? They asked if something had happened to you. She informed. Kushina scratched her head upon hearing that.
Well, let's just say I wasn't prepared for some things, said Kushina, remembering the sudden shock from the transformation that Kurama forced her into, which caused her to destabilize the shadow clone jutsu.
Tsunade nodded before turning to Minato.
Well, I hope you all made it back safely, she said.
Minato smiled.
You don't need to worry about that, Tsunade, he said, while she nodded.
Anyway, the Konoha ninjas who came here today want to talk to you, she said, while Minato was already sensing their presence in the middle of the sea's surface.
That was why he had stopped the moment they arrived. And the members of the Fish Clan, have they arrived? Asked Minato, changing the subject.
Yes. They came asking about you, since they followed the horns here.
The Uzumakis were a bit confused, but I told them you had gone out and they'd have better luck early tomorrow morning, not knowing how you would handle training, said Tsunade.
I understand. I'll summon one of them, Minato replied. At that moment, Hanabi also entered the room, curious. And Minato turned to the street door. You can prepare the food today.
I'll take care of some things, he said, with a tone of boredom, while the girls nodded. He opened the door and disappeared the next moment.
Did you know that Jiraiya appeared at Mount Mayaboku? Makoto informed Hanabi, who was surprised. Really? How is Sensei? Asked Hanabi.
Well, he's returning to Konoha, but he's fine, said Makoto, as they went to the kitchen to prepare tonight's dinner, even though they preferred Minato's cooking. At the same time, Minato went to the east side of the island. Upon landing, he surprised some Uzumaki sentries who were in the area, who looked at him in shock. They were still guarding all sides of the island, but that one was particularly important due to the enormous kraken trap there.
Minato asked them to keep the creature restrained and they managed to do so with seals.
He only hoped that Makoto would have control over the creature later with the Sharingan. Then, he signaled for the sentries not to worry about him, while he went into the middle of the water and quickly formed a hand seal. In the next instant, a huge fish appeared, surprising him as it found itself in midair before falling back into the water. The creature quickly stared at Minato.
It's you, said the elder, staring at Minato.
Hello, I just came to let you know that I'd like you to come here tomorrow morning, so we can talk as soon as the sun rises, Minato requested, while the fish nodded.
All right, I'll do that.
Anyway, I'll head back to the middle of the sea. The others will find it strange if I disappear from the school like this.
Minato, tomorrow we will talk.
He spoke, and Minato nodded. Minato turned as soon as he saw the fish vanish, and his eyes went to the sky on the other side of the village. He simply shone and expanded like lightning in that direction, before the other sentries could react. Minato was in the middle of the clouds the next instant, when the light had stopped with his body materializing in a flash, before he looked down at the Konoha group below him. Nothing more than a flash appeared once again, and he quickly advanced, glowing, before streaking like lightning toward the location. The Konoha group had arrived at Uzushiogakyure in the middle of the afternoon, since, that same morning, the entire village already knew Minato had departed. They immediately formed a team to talk to him. When they arrived, Minato wasn't there, and they had to wait. They didn't leave, but stayed at a distance from the clan, since the Uzumakis didn't seem very receptive toward them, looking at them with disdain and not wanting them to approach. They only hoped Minato would at least come to talk. They had been there, standing still, for about 8 straight hours, when everything seemed calm, until a glow appeared in the sky coming from the Uzumaki clan so fast that all heads turned upward, looking at what seemed like a falling star. Before they could understand what was happening, another yellow bolt struck the sea in front of them straight from the sky, exploding the water. They immediately went on alert, with the waters churning and the wave from the blast descending, while Minato appeared before them. He was calm, staring at each one of them. Let me guess, the Hokage assembled your team. I see many familiar faces. This team seems to know me very well, maybe to try convincing me more easily, Minato said casually, eyeing each of the ninjas wearing cloaks and masks. The masks didn't stop Minato from knowing who they were, since he perceived more than just their chakra as a sensor, he could even tell what their faces looked like behind the masks. "Minato Namikaze," said Alpha, the leader of the team, while Minato nodded with a gleam of recognition.
"It's been a long time, Alpha. How have you been?" Minato asked his former Umbu captain. "Busy."
"Quite busy, ever since things happened in the village," he said in a more casual tone, as if he really were speaking to an acquaintance and not the target of his mission. Minato nodded, satisfied with that, while also noticing frustrated looks from some of them. It wasn't anger toward him, at least it didn't seem so, but rather shame and frustration. The team there seemed divided. "Well, Minato, our mission here is to ask you why," said Alpha, looking at Minato, mainly at his headband with the slash cutting through Konoha's symbol. Minato observed him, with Alpha furrowing his brow with a sad, almost disappointed expression. To Alpha, Minato had a bright future, and until yesterday everyone thought he could even become Hokage now. How could he throw it all away? Some wouldn't understand the reasons Minato had explained to Tsukumo, Tsunade, and Jiraiya, who would certainly understand why he was doing this.
"Okay, I know many people already know my reason and the why of it, Alpha.
But let me explain, I'm here because I won't let the Uzumaki clan be destroyed, and I don't care about sacrificing a future position as Hokage.
I'm doing this because I believe it's the right thing.
I will fight for the Uzumaki clan, which was cast aside by the Leaf Village when it turned its back on its greatest allies," Minato said firmly. A gleam of recognition appeared in many of them. Some already suspected this, but hearing such a declaration from Minato's own mouth was striking. "Still, Minato, you ran away with the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, a military weapon of Konoha," someone retorted. "I honestly don't see you as an enemy. I don't believe you want to harm the village, but surely you know what's at stake when you flee with the Jinchuriki." After those words from that ninja, whose intentions Minato could even understand for the sake of the village, he couldn't help but grow angry. An explosion erupted from his body the next instant, making everyone recoil in shock. Yellow lightning began to surge all around the area as Minato glared in fury.
"Kushina is not a tool of the village," he roared.
"As much as I understand why you're here to retrieve her or to find out if she'll return to the village, that does not mean I'll allow you to treat her like a weapon of war. When she was locked in a cage by the leaders of the village and I was incompetent enough to let her be kidnapped, that was just fine for them. Now that Kushina has power over herself, you're all cautious, but let me tell you something. The bijou should not be weapons of war chained by the will of a village.
That is wrong, and I will never allow Kushina to be a tool of the village."
The conqueror's haki continued radiating powerfully in every direction. Minato was improving at the skill, at least he could now summon it by his own will. Even though he could only bring down a couple dozen ninjas, he was satisfied. After fighting Danzo, he had learned it could be invoked whenever he wanted, and he still intended to train it until it became even more powerful. The haki continued, and the group was certainly frightened, raising their hands in front of their faces.
Minato could feel the fear in all of them.
They were as terrified as the village itself had been when it witnessed the power of his companions.
But they couldn't forget one thing, something even more dangerous.
Even among Minato's brides, with some of them being a perfect Jinchuriki and an Uchiha with the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, he was still the central figure of the group, the true leader. He didn't rule only because all those girls were in love with him, but because his strength surpassed that of everyone else, and no one in the village could contest that fact, especially his team, who knew very well what Minato was capable of. They also knew he still had many cards up his sleeve, the same ones that allowed him to defeat a Kage and fight Orochimaru and thousands of sand ninjas in the middle of the desert at the same time.
They even said that Orochimaru himself had left shaken after his battle against Minato.
Minato began to calm down, the lightning fading, and the team's cloaks rustled with the wind created solely by the aura of his haki, which also slowly dissipated. The ninjas looked at him, confused and cautious. They felt no chakra coming from him, which was terrifying. The sensors, in particular, were in shock. They should be able to sense chakra in everything, even in an explosion of aura. But this was different from anything they had ever witnessed.
My answer is that we won't return to the village while the Uzumakis are in danger. If Konoha didn't want to fight, then we'll do it on our own.
In the village, tell your superiors what you heard here. After all, we don't want to be disturbed when we're about to face an entire war, Minato said firmly.
Alpha merely nodded. There was nothing more to say.
Everything that needed to be spoken had already been said. Minato had made his decision, and they would have to inform Konoha.
They couldn't do anything against him. Wait!
Minato was about to turn when someone called out to him. He stopped, turning his gaze back.
Minato, this isn't right, murmured a feminine voice. He gave a faint smile.
It was Mirage, daughter of the patriarch of the Kurama clan, the very one who, in the end, had been the only one to betray Minato among the leaders he had gathered to try to stand against Konoha. Minato had summoned her father precisely because of her.
It was no wonder that Mirage looked more ashamed and frustrated than anyone else there.
She felt guilty, for in the end, her father had turned against Minato and revealed his plans to the village leadership, who then tried to ambush him.
If you think I'm angry with you because of your father's decisions, you're mistaken.
I don't hate him.
If you want to talk about it.
Minato smiled for a moment. He didn't feel hatred or anger, disappointed, yes, but not to the point of holding resentment toward her father and much less toward her. He knew very well that some leaders might report him, even so, he had acted because he had enough strength to take the risk.
That's not what I mean.
I'm sorry for what my father did. I'm ashamed of it, she said, lowering her head before returning to her companions.
But I want to stay too, Minato is right and I want to help him.
She's right, another commented. Minato could already see what was forming there. Alpha seemed cautious and divided, but the atmosphere was becoming a sort of emotional rally.
Minato then raised his voice, firmly.
Listen everyone, if you believe you want to stay here to fight and abandon the village, I must disappoint you, you don't need to. You would be unnecessary, he said, in a harsh tone. He didn't want to involve more people in this, as much as they were old friends, he didn't want to put them in a worse situation than the one he had already subjected his companions to.
Before you can argue, you don't need to come. We have enough strength to fight. I don't want you to get harmed.
And if you do come, I will teleport you back to the village of Konoha, you know I'm capable of that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to rest.
Tomorrow I must prepare, the war approaches every day. With that, Minato simply disappeared the next moment, leaving everyone standing there.
That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.